What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the PRA podcast. I really want to thank anybody for listening. Today we're going to be going over regrets and coping and how to get through all of this, because I know that it can be hard. It can be hard when you're filled with regret. It can be hard when you're just trying to cope with everyday life. If you're trying to grieve with, a death, or if you're trying to cope with certain things that are going on, it can be very hard. And it can be very hard to deal with regret because we don't want to live with regret. And it's hard to distinguish what we're going to do now that we might or might not regret later. So what this podcast and what this episode is going to help you with is to put this in perspective a little bit. And then I'm going to give you, as always, some tactics at the end that I personally use, so that way, hopefully, this can help you out a little bit, especially if you're feeling like you're lacking a little bit of clarity and focus. So I'm going to read a passage real quick from my book. It's called Jericho's Journey, a journey of self-discovery through progression. And it's basically on the clarity and focus chapter part of it. And then this also just falls into momentum for tomorrow, which is physical health. So basically, it goes like this. It's the repetition of affirmations that leads to belief. And once that belief becomes a deep conviction, things begin to happen. Muhammad Ali. It's easier said than done just to produce useful energy from bad. Trust me, I know. But this is why we all need all of the help that we can get. It isn't enough to just feel positive. We need to start taking advantage of everything that we have at our disposal, instead of taking for granted the bodies in which we have to thrive. We are what we eat. And I feel people do not genuinely understand the crisis that we face with obesity and unhealthy compounding habits. Basically, we are taking the junk and trying to turn it into fuel that will allow us to perform. The worst part is most people are not willing to take the time to genuinely care about themselves, and they end up waiting until it's too late. Others simply don't care, and others just feel that it's too expensive. So I'm going to read you guys this next piece on the top 5 regrets of dying. A palliative nurse recorded the top 5 regrets of people on their deathbeds and put it into a book entitled The Top 5 Regrets of Dying. This was the list that she shared. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. I wish that I had let myself be happier. Do not wait until it is too late. And so the reason why I wanted to read that to you guys specifically is because I really wanted to get across the fact that the top 5 regrets of dying had nothing to do with status. They had nothing to do with money. Instead, what it had to do with was being yourself. Being able to express the way that you feel. Being able to let yourself be happy. Right? I mean, I feel like these are very realistic things. I mean, I know that, like, when I think about certain ways, whenever I'm not here, I sit there and think, like, was I really happy? Was I living a life true to myself? Like, was it really what I wanted? Or was it something that I felt was being forced on me by somebody else, by somebody else's influence, by somebody else's sort of demands, right? And I think that when it comes to regret, we have a hard time thinking about what the right decision is, because it's like, okay, well, the what ifs start playing in your mind, right? Like, oh, well, if I do this, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Instead of just presently making the decisions as they come to you. There's a lot of things that we feel when it comes to, like, the ways that our gut is telling us to react, or the ways that, you know what I mean? And so when we don't, and we ignore these things, we're basically kind of ignoring our human instincts of what we think is right and wrong. So we're going against something that's naturally supposed to happen. I mean, granted, everything is supposed to happen as it is, but what happens with that is you're almost forcing an outcome for yourself, which is ultimately going to end you in a worse position. Because when you're starting to force things, that's not truth. That's not love, and those are the highest vibrations. So you can't manipulate the system to working out the way that it's supposed to. You have to give yourself up to the system and let things play out the way that they're supposed to, if that makes sense. That's ultimately going to reduce the amount of regret that you feel, because you're giving into your best self at that point. You're giving into the parts of you that you would normally be doubting and hesitating with. So it's really important for you to start trusting that inner voice and start strengthening that inner voice, so that way it's not a doubtful sort of maybe, but what if. It's more of a, I'm going to do this right now, whether it's right or wrong, whether it's the right or wrong decision, I'm not going to dwell on it, I'm just going to keep moving. That's what it's about, because then ultimately you won't have these regrets. You won't wish that you had a courage to live the life that you know now, because you're already doing it. You're not going to wish that you hadn't worked so hard, because in the moments that you're making those decisions, you're working your ass off. Expressing your feelings, that goes along with that. Wishing you stay in touch with your friends, that's just building connections, which is ultimately going to happen if you don't, seclude yourself and stop letting those stories and those doubts kind of plague you. When you can be open about that, that's part of just being happy and being openly yourself, which is ultimately going to create more bliss in your life than regret. And then just letting yourself be happy, that's part of being you. When you can be your full self, that's when you're most happy. You're in the most present piece of who you are. So that's what's really important with that. Now, there's a lot of people out there who don't see clearly, who can't see clearly, because they're so fogged up and they're so distracted by certain things. But when you're less self-aware, you'll become more distracted. That's just the way that it works. It's like a tandem effect. And I always did this. I always lacked because I always judged myself for becoming distracted. And so I wanted to have the courage, but I never could. To overcome all those mistakes, to overcome all those things that we all fear, it's really hard. It's really hard to accept certain things. It's really hard to accept the fact that somebody's not there. Or it's really hard to accept the fact that something's gone. Or the fact that, we have to accept something that we might not enjoy. Self-discipline, self-love type of stuff. But you got to understand that coping is going to completely take away the regret. When you can simply just learn to cope with things enough to the point where it's like you're grateful for it, because that's ultimately what is propelling you to that other side, you won't feel regret. You won't feel regret. I would much rather feel cope than regret, because then at least I know that I'm progressively working to be courageous in this moment. I'm not getting paralyzed by this, and so that's what's really important. It's important where if you want to have clarity and focus, you definitely need to start figuring out your own system where you can start coping with things. And there's different grief, the 7 things of grief, or whatever, the 7 stages of grief, or whatever it's called. That's fine, but you've also got to realize that dealing with the grief is not stuffing it down. It's not ignoring it. It's not forcing an outcome, much like we try to do. We always try to force. Regardless of what happens to you, you've got to let it go. You've got to let it go. Whether it's good, bad, ugly, positive, negative, it doesn't matter. Because the moment that you don't let it go and you hold on to it, it's going to be however long you do that is going to be the amount of regret that you do that for. Because it's not truth. It's not love. It's not in that vibrational realm. It's not resonating with any of that. Instead, that's manipulation, because you're trying to manipulate the system. You're trying to manipulate the future and all these other things to create an outcome that you want to see for yourself. But that, again, is manipulation. In order to love and have truth and be able to not have regret and be able to cope with certain things, you're definitely going to have to be able to let go. Let go. Surrender. Stop counting points. Stop holding on to all of this stuff. You've got to learn to let go, because when you can surrender, you're starting to present accountability, and that's going to be the very beginning of gratitude for today, is having accountability and perspective and a good mindset. You know what I mean? So you've got to do that. You've got to do that to develop have a good mindset, have some perspective, have accountability enough to know that you need to surrender to create that gratitude for today, and then start having momentum for tomorrow by increasing your truth and love and vibrational systems. Raise those up so that way you can have more clarity and more focus and less regrets with more healthy coping. You're able to take this stuff, internalize it, and not let it plague you, but let it fuel you. That's the difference between knowingly going towards things that you know you're going to regret versus like coping with things that you know you're going to be courageous on. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of why I'm going to go into these tactics real quick. That way we can kind of, have a really good, short, and informative podcast. And then that way we can keep going through and we can help you guys out if you are feeling certain levels of regret or certain levels of like, oh, I don't know if I can get through this or whatever. So first tactic is going to be exploration. So are you exploring this stuff? Like, are you exploring deeper? I talked about this a little bit before with knowing your value, but like, are you exploring, or no, knowing versus feeling your emotion, but are you exploring these things? Are you exploring these things into a depth where you're being so curious that you're actually fascinated by with what's going on here? Because if not, you're always going to be kind of in that unknown zone. And when you're usually in the unknown zone, you're not moving the needle at all because you're too nervous. You're like, it's like paralysis. It's like, decision paralysis. You know what I mean? Like, you're not able to make a free form decision because you're constantly just overanalyzing. I do that a lot. So exploration, explore deeper into what you're feeling. Number 2, transmuting energy practice. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're feeling some sort of regret or you're feeling some sort of negativity or something like that. The way that you can transmute this energy is you can either get it out in a healthy, positive way, such as, writing a song and getting that out, or writing some poetry, or just simply writing, or just expressing yourself. Go work out, go do something. Go do some yoga, go do some jujitsu, something like that. Whatever is going to keep you in that flow state, so where you're kind of not thinking about it, but you're in the present moment. Okay, so transmute that energy, because what's going to happen is when you do that and you're in a neutral state, going from a negative state, you kind of cancel it out, and you're kind of re-evaluating and kind of synthesizing your energy to be pushed back out, and then when you can redirect it and focus on a positive outlet or something like that, like working out, you're bettering yourself, boom, 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 it's going to apply to that. That's why a lot of people use that, okay, like I'm mad, or this person did this to me, so I'm going to use that in the fight, or I'm going to use that in the basketball game, or I'm going to use that in the soccer game, I'm going to use that as fuel, boom, boom, boom. That's what it's about. Transmute your energy. Number 3, meditation. So that's what I'm talking about, is you've got to actually learn and know how to meditate. How are you meditating? Are you taking the time to actually do it, or do something that's putting you in the flow state, or are you constantly in reactive mode? And as we know, if you don't have a rolodex and a system to identify that, you're always going to be reactive. You're not going to get into proactive mode. So start to meditate, start to be able to become aware, start to recenter, start to focus, start to get yourself back into the present. Eat fruit and vegetables. I know this sounds a little bit weird, but a lot of what we eat has a lot of entails a lot of what we think about. So like, our food directly reflects the way we think, the way that we utilize our energy, the way that we feel, the way that our gut gets our energy, which is our second brain. So if our gut is feeling pretty shitty, we're going to feel pretty shitty. Is that going to higher our vibration or lower our vibration? It's going to lower our vibration. So eat right, eat some fruits and vegetables, eat some whole foods, you know what I mean? Don't just eat a bunch of crap, okay? Especially with the rise of obesity and dementia as well. Working out. So like I said, work out. That's a healthy way to get your stress out, get all of this extra weight out that you're feeling. Let's say you are extremely upset that somebody did something wrong to you or something like that. If you're not doing anything and you're sitting there dwelling on it, all you're doing is trying to not let that thing happen again. Your whole life is predicated on one thing, and that is to not let one thing happen. When in reality, you can't control anything in this world. All you can control is your reaction. So by inherently trying to manipulate the situation, like I said, you're losing control of your own reaction, which is definitely not going to help you at all in any way. All right, so connection. That's going to be another tactic. So tactic number 6 is going to be connection. Are you connecting with people? Are you actually talking to people? Are you talking to people, or are you just commenting on people's feeds? Actually start to build relationships. Actually start to look at the relationships around you and see if they're healthy connections. If they're not, a majority of the connections that you have are unhealthy, I can tell you that your energy levels are going to be very low. You might be projecting certain things outward and you're not really feeling very, very upbeat at all. You're feeling kind of low. And I always say, like, how you feel about your life is directly reflected upon how you view yourself. And if you're not connecting with people, you might feel like there's something wrong with you. So you might be hesitant, you might be shy, or you might just be getting down on yourself every time you get the courage to walk up to somebody and talk to them, or message them or something. So start to rebuild the connections in your life. Start to form new connections in your life. Start to really feel, or spew out how you're actually feeling, and see what that does with the connections within your little circle. And then passion incorporation. So are you incorporating something that you love every single day in your life? Because if not, you're going to feel pretty drained every day. When we do things that fill us up, it fills our energy bar up as well. So learn what makes you tick enough to know what is providing you with energy and what's draining you with energy. What draining your energy, realistically. So the things that, and I've talked about this, on a podcast too, with Albuquerque Business Podcast with Jason Rigby, where he's saying, if you're not saying fuck yeah, you're not saying hell yeah, it's going to deplete your energy. So you got to do the things that are calling you, and where you're saying hell yeah, like let's do that. Or the things that you're kind of iffy on as far as the resistance part goes, you need to be like, hell yeah, it's going to allow me to grow. But if there's something that you're just absolutely dreading, you can tell that it's draining you, you've got to figure out a way. And I know that if it's a job, it can be kind of hard to really totally redo your whole life overnight. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. But as long as you incorporate what you love into every day, it'll at least fill the bar up a little bit more, so that way you're not in the negatives every day. You're at least coming up with a positive number, so that way you're not totally depleted, and you have a little bit of energy to kind of carry over for momentum for tomorrow. So and then lastly, using the rolodex triggers. So last week I went over the rolodex kind of method, and if you guys, well, actually it was on Monday, so last week on Monday. So if you guys haven't already, please refer back or listen to this episode after this one, and then refer back to the Rolodex and creating your own Rolodex, because that's going to help you out a lot. When you can use your Rolodex triggers, what that means is you've already created your own system. You've identified, you're aware. So when that stuff starts to happen, you can start to use the Rolodex method and start to refer back to those moments of when you were feeling certain things. So all of these things that you work on, that you practice on, if you hit even 3 of these things, it will totally reform the way that you are viewing certain things when it comes to regret and coping. So let's say oh, I don't want to go through that because it just hurts too much. It hurts too much to try this stuff. I don't think you understand, Sam. It's just insane. I totally got hurt. Blah, blah, blah. It's crazy. I can never forgive the people. That's just on you. That really is on you. Because basically what's going on there is you're creating a lot of regret. Because what's going to happen is you're not coping properly. You're just saying it's their fault. You're pointing blame. You're not taking accountability. What's going to happen there is you're going to cause a lot more regret internally for yourself. You're going to be like, man, I really held on to that for that many years. God, I wish I didn't waste so much time and energy holding on to that grudge, because grudges and all these things that are in the past, they compound as well. So when they start to compound and you're not dealing with it properly and coping with it properly, then what happens is it starts to multiply and multiply and multiply, and that stuff weighs actual weight. So whenever it starts to weigh down on you a lot more, it takes a lot more effort and time to strip that from you. So it's good to just nip it in the bud right away and start to cope with things, start to accept things, start to surrender to things, and not be forcing things to happen. That's why it's important. You're not creating any good habit loops and any trigger loops by just forcing things to happen. If you were to try and do that against the current in a tsunami, you would die. There's just no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. And chances are you might die in that tsunami if you go with the current. But you might still have some chance. You know what I mean? Like, even if you're just planted and you're holding on for dear life, but the current is still there, even just holding on can take you somewhere better than where you were. But by trying to completely take all of your energy and force against the current, you're burning yourself out. Because if the current sweeps you to a specific island or a specific thing that you can hold on to, and you can start to climb maybe to higher ground, that wouldn't have happened if you wouldn't have let go and let the current take you just a little bit. So learn to let go. Learn to let go of regret. Learn to let go of anything, any grudges, anything that you're holding on to. Learn to let go, because it will turn into regret. The more that we hold on to things, the more regret forms underneath that surface. But when we can start to cope with things properly and in a healthy way, then not only do we cut down on the amount of weight, we cut down on the amount of projection. So let's say like somebody's really making us mad and it's just weighing us down, and then you take it out on your spouse, you take it out on your kids, you take it out on your boss. But it's not them that's doing the harm, it's yourself. It's the person inside of you that cannot let go. So just learn to let go. Whatever it is, learn to let it go. Like Frozen. Let it go. Literally, just let it go. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of get on here and talk about that, because I didn't want any, like, what I realized is a lot of people, they play a tit for tat game. They play this game where if somebody did something to me, then I'm going to do something to them. Or I'm going to hold on to it until that way I have this over this person. Like I'm going to hold on to this internally because I have this over this person, or I'm going to get them back eventually. And that's when you're just trying to manipulate an outcome that you want. That's when you're trying to manipulate the system. That's not truth. That's not love. And ultimately you're going to regret doing that, because even if you do get revenge, like, how are you going to feel after? You're going to feel really good, right? That's not usually the case. You don't usually feel really good for making somebody else feel really bad. I don't care what they did to you. That's never been the case for me. I always kind of feel a little bit like shit, because I'm like, man, who actually knows what they were going through? And maybe the thing that they tried to do to me wasn't intentional. But the fact that I'm even holding on to it is depleting so much energy out of me. It's not allowing me to be present within my own judgment, within my own decision making. And when that happens, you're hurting yourself. You're hurting your potential. You're hindering your growth, because it's not the right resistance. That's like lifting wrong. It's like holding on to grudges and shit is like lifting wrong, right? Like you're doing the work, but you're not doing it the right way. So you're probably going to hurt yourself, so you might as well take the right foundational, aspects of the fundamentals and actually learn something and do it correctly. That's what coping is healthy. Cope in a healthy way. So that way you're not transmuting a bunch of anger and stuff. You're transmuting the right amount of like love and truth back into the world, so you can receive that. When we resonate with things on the same vibrational level, on the same vibrational frequency, that's when we get the law of attraction. It doesn't happen when we're just hating on people and blah blah blah, but we're thinking positively. Like that doesn't work. That's not a thing. That doesn't work. And you can't be in a state other than gratitude. It's been scientifically shown. You can't be in another state of mind when you're in complete gratitude. So if you can work on your gratitude practices, which I've gone over before, I should make another podcast specifically on gratitude practices. I'll probably do that. But when you can be in a level of gratitude, you're not worried about what people did to you. You're not worried about the things that people are doing wrong, even, like, because you're not judging people at that point. You're just worried about who you are and what's going on with what you have in front of you. And that, I think, is something that we should definitely do, so that way we're not facing ourselves in the mirror later on in life with just a bunch of regret. So good vibes, guys. I really hope you guys watch this over. I really hope you guys, if you guys have any 2 cents, please comment on this as well. Appreciate you, brother. I really want to thank you for coming in. If you guys haven't already, please favorite the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. And I just started my Facebook group. So with the Facebook group, like I said, This is a group where we can all connect on a like-minded area, and we can all kind of expose ourselves to different people, different ideas, different stories, so we can help further expand ourselves from where we currently are. So go with that. I really want to thank you guys for listening in. And don't forget to leave a review. Also, I'm starting to really kind of be better with that. But please, if you guys are listening to this currently, go to Apple Podcasts, leave a review on the podcast, because it really helps the podcast actually grow. And then don't forget to share, post it in your stories if you are listening. And then I'm trying to get everything together for a giveaway for my books here pretty soon. But kind of stay tuned for that, because I will be giving a bunch of my books away. So good vibes, guys. I really want to thank you guys for watching / listening. If you did, please drop a comment. Let me know what you guys took if you guys took any value and what you guys took from it. But I'll talk to you guys soon. And yeah, we are the path. Good vibes.